Sorry, Oliver.
And then I also think she's like a curse kind of though, because sometimes like she'll like touch the A and like hits her with like a burning, and I feel like she's almost like the physical representation of like the Scarlet Letter, and like she brings her mother pain at the same time as like she brings her happiness.
Although Hester never complains about her, and is always very humble about her, and loves her a lot.
Sometimes, you know, she's like that kid, like she'll like say like, oh, what is like with that like child, you know?
Yeah, it's like, oh, that's because of her behavior. It's like whenever you're a parent, you're more embarrassed of your child's behavior, or even more embarrassed for yourself because you must have taught them out what that's about, so.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. Another thing that is a really interesting piece of this puzzle is towards the end of the book. It's on page 229 if you want to go there. Dimmesdale is obviously suffering up on the platform, and he has just kind of openly accepted Pearl and Hester. And it says, Pearl kissed his lips. A spell was broken. The great scene of grief in which the wild infant bore a part had developed all her sympathies, and as her tears fell upon her father's cheek, they were the pledge that she would grow up amid human joy and sorrow, nor forever do battle with the world, but be a woman in it. And then it says, towards her mother too, Pearl's errand as a messenger of anguish was all fulfilled. So it kind of points to the point that maybe Pearl was meant to be a curse. I don't know, but eventually she ended up kind of fulfilling this kind of punishment that Hester was inflicted in a symbolic sense. Does anyone have any thoughts on that?
Well, I think, during that time when I was reading that, when I had the thought that, Pearl is kind of seen as a symbol throughout the book. She's just, kind of the symbol of the Scarlet Letter, and you don't, for me, I didn't really think of her as a character. I almost thought of her as just, a thing in the story, and she influenced other people, but, when she kisses Dimmesdale, it kind of shows that she is a human, and she kind of gets the human characteristics and says that she will be a human in the world, and that she can, be her own person, because she seems almost like an elf or the devil or something throughout the book, and then when she kisses him and realizes that that's her father, she kind of becomes her own person.
I feel like there's that fear throughout the book that Pearl is just going to grow up to be another Hester, and, get the Scarlet Letter herself. So then, when she breaks that, curse of it, and everything's revealed to the community, I feel like it's, this part where everyone in the story can just, move on from what has happened.
Yeah, I think that that's definitely, at least towards the end of the story in Hester's life, I think that Pearl is definitely ends up being a blessing to her. But there are a lot of moments of curses too.
Well, I don't feel like Pearl ever really was a curse because she was just born into that situation. She was a result of some, the stupidity that they had, but so she was just kind of born into a curse. It's not her fault. And, at the end of the book, we were just talking about where she kissed him. I feel like she kind of, grows out of that, and they see her as, a normal person, not a curse anymore.
Raise my hand. We keep talking about Pearl being a character, and I had a really hard time seeing her as that because, the way she talks and the way she acts, it's so weirdly mature and dramatic, the way the author wrote it, that I think she's obviously meant for symbolism, but the reason I think she's a curse is because she's so not childlike, so I can't have any sympathy for her, and it just freaks me out that a child like her talks the way she does and acts the way she does, and yeah.
Yeah, I kind of agree. She's more of a symbol than a character, and I kind of thought that she was almost a symbol of the adultery, because they say she's beautiful, and that's kind of like the love that Hester and Dimmesdale found, but it's also a curse at the exact same time, because she'll never let her mother take off the letter, she'll never let her forget. So
along with that, I thought that it was very interesting how Pearl would always ask her mother what the Scarlet Letter represents, but Hester wouldn't, she would hardly ever, actually tell her what it meant. And I thought that was interesting, and that just kind of shows that Pearl is a reminder of what the Scarlet Letter represents. First of all, because she is a product of that sin, and she always asks about the Scarlet Letter, and I just thought that that was interesting how she's a reminder to Hester.
I think it's ironic that Pearl was even sent to, like, Hester in the first place, because in the Puritan society, they believe that, like, I mean, they're very religious, obviously, and they believe that, like, God gives you, like, the consequences that you deserve, and in the book, they describe Pearl as something beautiful, and, like, but she was given Pearl, like, Pearl was a, like, we keep saying that Pearl is a, like, she's there because of Dimmesdale and Hester, and, like, but yet Hester is given Pearl, like, something beautiful, even though she committed adultery, so.
I think that a lot of that plays into the fourth question on the 10 questions that talks about why Pearl is so smart, creepy, naughty, persistent, and all those other adjectives that are used to describe him. Like, what does she represent?
I think she represents like the Scarlet Letter, like the actual Scarlet Letter, because the one that like Hester always wears, like eventually people start to see it now as like able, like they can get like see it starts standing for able instead of like adulterer, where like Pearl like will not like forget about the A, like there it said like she always brings it up, she's always asking her mom about it, like she's like the reason, like the only thing that like you could say that proves that Hester committed adultery.
I also think that she's a symbol of confusion, because she doesn't really know the circumstances that her mom is in or where her dad is, and you can tell that through her actions and the way that she talks, and yeah, it's just seen throughout the book that she doesn't really know what to do in her behaviors and how she acts now.
When Katie read the quote from the end of the book where Pearl kisses Dimmesdale, that made me start to think that maybe Pearl isn't the representation necessarily of the Scarlet Letter, or it's more of the effects of sin and how it affects other people, because she spent the first 7 years of her life without a father, and that makes start thinking, what does that do to a person? What does that? Because I wouldn't know, because I've had parents, but it's this child who's already estranged from the community also doesn't have a full family to come home to, and I think that would affect her actions as the writer like wrote her part. That could be another why she's smart, why she's creepy, why she's naughty, is because she's trying to either get attention or try to kind of almost dig the answers out of the people around her to figure out why people think she's different. Like, lots of people have said that she's like a symbol, but she's also a character in the way that she has human emotions, but we've taken those away from her because we think of her, oh, she's just the product of sin.
I think one of the reasons she's so creepy and everything is because, like, in the Puritan society, along with Anne-Marie, was saying that it's kind of more strange that they're giving Hester this child, because I think they really value families and children, and I think they give it to her because they're like, oh, well, you fessed up for your sin, so here's a child, this is like your second chance. And if she were to have been a normal child or just sweet, then the story would have moved on, and then they wouldn't have had a story because they need her to be so creepy to carry on Hester's guilt, even though she's already confessed for it.
Okay, so I'm like looking at number 3 of the 12 questions, and it's talking about who's suffering the most in the novel. And Pearl definitely has a strong symbolic significance as we're talking about this. Do you think that the person suffering the most could be the character, Pearl?
I think it's Dimmesdale, because although like he feels like tremendous guilt because although he committed the sin, he didn't need the repercussions of it, and it all fell on Hester. And like I think an example of this is how he always clasps his hand over his heart, and Pearl like mentions this, and like why does he do this? Like, it's like similar to you, like how like you have the red A. And then another example I think is when he goes to like the pillory where she stood, and he like sits there and he just like feels like tremendous guilt, and he I think he goes to his knees because he just like feels so terribly about it. That just like shows how he like just feels so much guilt more than anyone else.
I agree with that because all the other characters in the book, they experience like suffering, but it's on the grief scale. Like they suffer for like a short time and then it's over with and they get on with their lives. But Dimmesdale is like this 7-year period where he's just like being poisoned by his own soul, and it's just like we see the character just crumble throughout the book.
Like what you said, I don't feel like it was Pearl because she's so young and she only grew up without a father and she doesn't know what the A meant or anything, so that's just what she grew up knowing. So, and she's so innocent, I just feel like she doesn't understand her situation.
I think that, like, Hester also suffers a lot, but in a different way. Like, Dimmesdale, he, like, has to endure, like, internal, like, torture. I'm sorry. But, like, and I think that would be really hard because he's, like, a religious figure, and I think, like, repentance is really important for him, but he, like, can't do it. But Hester, is punished in a different way, and she suffers, like, publicly, and just like every day be reminded of it, but and it's probably when Dimmesdale's reminded of it every day.
Yeah, I think that Dimmesdale, another reason that he probably suffers so much is just because like he has the high status of being a pastor, and I think that'd be hard just because so many people in the community, like everyone really looks to him as like a beacon of light just because he's their religious leader, and like they think that he's almost perfect and like, but yet he's like commit this huge sin, and so like I think that'd be hard for him, not only just like that, but he's almost letting the whole community down just because of that.
So I agree with all of you. I'm kind of gonna go in like a different route. I feel like even though it seems weird that Chillingworth is actually suffering the most, because it's like he goes from this old scholar guy who I feel like he was a pretty good guy, maybe, and then he just like goes all like evil and like almost like the devil, but it's like what Hester did hurt him so much, and he's suffering so much that like he has to make others feel his pain, so I feel like he must be hurting a lot, and I feel like he kind of recognizes that in the end, so I think he's, well, not that that like condemns his actions or anything, but yeah.
I think Chillingworth felt a lot of shame coming back and having, because in the book, actually I wrote a few notes, if I can find the page of annotations. But when he's talking about, he's talking about his former life and talking about how his world had been so cheerless without her, and the reason why he married her was because he wanted to feel that love and just simple, like have a home, have a family, just those basic things, and it comes after going through all these trials to find his wife. This is another reason for his suffering. To find his wife, and she loves someone else, which frankly I can't blame her because he's not exactly described as being the most handsome man in the book. But that could be like that could be a deep tearing turmoil, because the first time he sees his wife in the long time that they've been separated is her being punished for a sin that she had committed with another man, and all he can do is sit and watch and feel her shame.
I agree with that, and I also think Chillingworth is suffering because, in a way, he's almost a part of the sin, because if he hadn't, taken so long to come back to her, or been more reassuring when they were together, or more kind of loving husband, then she wouldn't have felt that disconnection from him and felt the urge to move on, or not necessarily move on, but get with Dimmesdale. But going back to Dimmesdale, I think Dimmesdale's suffering a lot because not only does he have the guilt of the sin he did, but yeah, he's also the religious leader, and he has the eyes of everyone in this town against him, so he feels a guilt for misrepresenting unto them. And then he also feels a guilt that, well, okay, on page 62, okay, it says, "Good Master Dinsdale," said he, "the responsibility of the woman's soul lies greatly with you. It behooves you, therefore, to exhort her to repentance and to confession, and as a proof and consequence thereof." So he also, not only did he like commit the sin with Hester, but he kind of had to be the one to punish her for it. And it's hard because he has to watch her every day struggle and wear the scarlet letter. He has to see his child and know that she doesn't have a father. He just has pretty much every person in his town is a constant reminder of everything he's suffering with. So that's why I think Dinsdale's suffering the most.
He also genuinely loves Hester, and to have to be separated because of his station is probably one of the worst. Like that would be, I don't know. We're teenagers, so we can't really understand the enormity of his love, but this separation, I think, is the most painful thing for him. It's why I think it's more than just the guilt he feels for committing the sin. I think every time he touches his heart, he's thinking about Hester and not being with her.
I agree with that, and I think also with the love, maybe one of the reasons both Hester and Dinsdale are suffering is that they're not truly repentant of their sin, because in the end they still love each other and want to be together.
I feel like because of Dinsdale's position now, like, he was able to take a lot of the suffering off of Hester. Like, they could have taken Hester's baby away when she was born in the prison, like, they could have even killed her. But because of Dinsdale, she gets like this lenient sentence, and like everyone just sort of overlooks it, but she just goes and lives in the woods instead.
I think, like, kind of with, like, what everyone's saying, like, I feel like Dinsdale's being pulled in, like, so many different directions, like, so many conflicting things, like, he loves Hester, but yet at the same time, he also wants to be a priest, and, like, he can't do all this stuff at the same time, where he's just kind of, like, in this panic frenzy, because there's so many things going on in his head, like, I think that's part of the reason, too, why he, like, tortures himself, is because he doesn't, like, he can't think of another way out, like, he's just, like, like, panic, like, I mean, you know, like, I'm sure we've all felt it, you know, just not knowing what to choose, like, friends or family or stuff like that, you just kind of want to scream and just be like, like, I think that's probably he, like, tortures himself.
I think that Minister of Maine is, like, we're seeing the true degradation, like, his character is just crumbling, like, literally there's this conflict inside him that's literally pulling his character apart. He has his love for Hester and his desires on one side, and then his responsibilities and his religious prowess on one side. And he just can't decide. And then you have that moment in the forest where he's finally like, okay, I love you. We're gonna go off. We're gonna have a happy life. And then as he's walking back to town, his other character comes back and as it throughout the entire chapter, it's like, all right, so you're supposed to be this good person. And then his other characters, no, I'm more powerful now. Love is more powerful. And like, it changes him, and just this conflict is driving him, I think, crazy, is because he doesn't know what to do.
Yeah, I agree with that. But at the same time, I feel as like Dinsdale could have handled the situation better. Like, he could have, like, confessed, but he chooses not to. He, like, specifically does not want to confess, and I mean, he brings up a good point when he's, like, he feels as if, like, feeling the guilt would be better than confession to him, because he doesn't want, like, his, I don't know, the people of his church to, like, judge him, and he feels like their judgments would be worse than, I guess, than just Hester's, or the pain he feels for that sin. I think it's interesting how over the course of the book his like opinion almost changes, because then when he gets in the forest and like, I don't know, like it starts getting happy, he then decides that he wants to like tell his church, his congregation about his sin, and he wants to live with Hester and be like truly happy instead of feeling like this overwhelming guilt all the time.
And back to who is suffering the most, I almost think Hester could be suffering the most because she has the guilt of Dimmesdale knowing that he is really guilty, and she has Pearl bringing it up all the time saying, why does he touch his heart, why does he touch his heart, and she probably feels awful because, like, she was part of this action and she's part of the reason why he is suffering. But then she also knows who Chillingworth is and how he is slowly making Dimmesdale's life really hard, but she also has to take care of Pearl at the same time, so she has 3 different things pulling at her because of what she did, because of her sin, and so I think she almost could be suffering more than anybody because she has the weight of Dimmesdale and Chillingworth and taking care of Pearl at the same time.
I almost feel like the guilt is like what, like the people who are suffering the most are the ones who feel the like most guilty. Like Chillingworth, that he's completely like his goal kind of is to destroy Hester's life, kind of. And like who is the most guilty? He's extremely guilty because he wasn't guilty in the beginning of anything. He didn't do anything wrong. But then he made it his goal to, like, basically destroy her life. And, like, he's not happy. He looks back on his life and he's like, I used to be a good guy, and now I've just completely and utterly, pretty much he's just lost it. And then Dimmesdale is actually feeling physical pain, and I'd say he's more guilty than Hester because he never even, he like refused to confess for so long. It's almost like he was just procrastinating his like repentance almost. And then there's Hester who, and I wouldn't say she's not suffering, but she is living her life and she's like doing okay, and sure she gets reminded of it, but she still has Pearl, she has that brightness in her life that, so it's kind of almost like the guilt is tied to who is suffering the most.
I think another part going along with that, it's on 173. Hester is talking to Dimmesdale and she says, you wrong yourself in this. You have deeply and sorely repented. Your sin is left behind you in the days long past. Your present life is not less holy than the very truth than it seems in people's eyes. Is there no reality in the penitence thus sealed and witnessed by good works, and therefore should it not bring you peace? It's like, Hester, whether or not she believes that about herself, like she has some sort of concept of forgiveness. Josh, Bruno, do you think that Hester has forgiven herself, or do you think she still lives with her guilt?
No, she kind of, well, to forgive yourself, you kind of, it's forgive and forget. You gotta kind of forgive about your sin, forget about your sin, and just forgive yourself for doing what you've done. I don't think she has.
And then on top of that, she never is able to forget that she committed the sin, because there's Pearl, which is she's always reminded of it, and then even when she goes into the town, she never is able to forget that she committed that sin, and she's never able to take off the Scarlet Letter, just like in the end of the book, she comes back and she's still wearing it.
I almost feel like her sin throughout most of the book is just dragging, like, the A on her chest is dragging her down throughout the whole book, and when they're in the forest and she finally rips it off, it's like she's freeing herself from the sin. She's not forgetting about it, but she can finally move on, like, the next chapter of her life, like, make things happier and keep going on.
I just don't really understand, like, everyone's going through all this, like, suffering and all this, and, like, obviously because they committed the sin and, like, suffering, like, has kind of happened just with the, like, as a consequence, but I don't really understand why they didn't, like, leave before. I don't know if I'm asking a question, but, like, it took, like, 7 years. Like, I don't get why Dimmesdale could just be like, hey, I'm just going to go and confess, like, right there in the moment when he, like, has never, and he could just, like, confess. And I feel like that would have been maybe better, and then she could, like, take off the Scarlet Letter wherever they went.
I think one of the reasons Dimmesdale didn't want to confess is because he knew that his suffering probably would have been worse if he didn't fess up and repent, and if he just had to deal with that torture the rest of his life and watching Hester not be with him. But I think he thought he deserved the guilt because, like, of his religious status, he did think what he did was wrong, and it's like leaving, well, not necessarily leaving Hester, but not being with her and watching her endure that struggle alone. I don't know, I feel like he might think that he doesn't deserve the right to confess, because in that way he can start to move on and begin a better life, even if he's going to be associated with his sins, like, to the rest of the town. I don't think
he feels he deserves, that, like, being able to move on.
I think it just takes him, to be honest, 7 years to finally figure out that he would rather confess his sin and be in love with Hester and be truly happy than just feel this overwhelming guilt all the time. And I think it just takes so long because, like, at the start, and I think it has to do with, like how his character just slowly, like, kind of withers away. And it reveals, like, what he truly wants. And, like, he becomes less strong, and then he realizes that he can't go on without Hester, and that he's slowly just gonna perish if he doesn't have Hester in his life more.
Someone said a while back that I just wanted to talk again about how Pearl is not suffering like hardly at all, because there's a quote on page 185 that says this is the narrator talking. She had, and it's talking about Hester, but I think this kind of concept in this quote kind of applies to everybody. She had not known to wait until she felt the freedom. So some people might say that Pearl was suffering because she didn't have a father for her whole life. But what this quote is saying is that she didn't know what it was like to have a father in the first place, and so she just grew up thinking that a father wasn't like an integral part of a family. And so once she actually kind of started getting to know or realizing that Dimmesdale was her father, then she kind of was becoming more interested in him and why he wasn't with her and Hester. But that's just because she was beginning to realize what she had been missing out on.
Although she does have a lot of expectations for her father, like when they're in the forest, and in the chapter The Child of Brookside, when she asks, well, is he going to come into town holding hands with us? And it's like, all right, so I know he's my father, but is he really going to be my father? Or am I just going to live the rest of my life without a father? And I think, like with what you were saying about her not knowing what it's like to have a father, she's lived in a Puritan community that's very close-knit, and even though they're kind of outcasts, she's seen all these other children, their fathers, for her whole life, and I think that holding hands into town is a good thing, is a good example, because it's something that she would see without having to get too close. So she's thinking, okay, so if he's my father, is he going to be the one to be with us? Is he going to be the one that's going to, I think you're right that she doesn't really know what the role of a father would be, but she knows what it would look like, and she doesn't know how it feels until when she kisses Dimmesdale at the end of the book. And then she has that's the moment where everything's released and everything's not quite resolved, but she knows what a father is.
See, and I kind of find that interesting too, because in the beginning of the book on like 102, it says, after putting her finger in her mouth with many words amiss, ungrateful refusals to answer good Mr. Wilson's questions, the child finally announced that she had not been mated at all, but had been plucked by her mother off a bush of wild roses that grew by the prison door. So it's like she really, like you can see the progression, like Benji was kind of saying, of like she doesn't have a father at the beginning. She doesn't like believe that she has a father or anything like that, not even like a heavenly father. And then like farther on in the book, it's like interesting, like he said, that she finally sees him, she sees Dimmesdale as her father, and like, yeah, so that's just kind of cool to see throughout the book.
Yeah, I think that that's a really interesting comparison that you just read on 102, because remember that at the beginning of the book, Hawthorne provided us with this one image in this dark world of a rose bush, and he said that it may serve, let us hope, to symbolize some sweet moral blossom that may be found along the track or relieve the darkening close of the tale of human frailty and sorrow. So in some way, the book does conclude, I think, and like throughout the book, we have all these like floods of sunshine and these moments of the woods and these moments of love and happiness that really do bring us back to that sweet moral blossom on the rose bush on the front of the prison. I think that that's a really important part of the book, that even in the midst of all this frailty and sorrow and suffering that all of the characters have experienced, there is joy. And are we just about done?
Yep, I think that wraps it up.